Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Atan Solomon, and this is episode 7 of our series. In this episode, we're taking you to the Great International Developer Summit, also known as GIDS 2024. At GIDS, our co-host Cassandra Chin met up with Tom Wheeler, who's a principal curriculum developer at Temporal Technologies. In this interview, Tom shares his journey of balancing a career in software engineering with his passion for education. On the educational side of things, Tom discusses his role in creating training and documentation that helps developers make their software more reliable. He also highlights the value of hands-on workshops, as well as some of the challenges of online teaching that have become prevalent in our society. Without further ado, let's head over to GIDS 2024.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Cassandra Chin, and today we have Tom
Wheeler.
Can you do a little introduction?
Yeah, my name's Tom Wheeler. I'm a principal curriculum developer at Temporal Technologies, and I help to write educational material, training and documentation that teaches people how to make their software more reliable.
I think you have a good edge on education. So do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I'd say education has been central to throughout my career. I've spent about half my career as a software engineer and the other half in technical education roles. And that's come about because I learned something and then I want to teach it to other people. So I'll teach it to other people on my team and I'll teach it to other people in the community at meetups and things like that, trying to share the knowledge that I've gained with others.
How did you get started into education? Because to teach, you have to first know it yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. To teach, you do have to know it yourself, but the act of teaching forces you to learn it more deeply than if you were simply a practitioner. So one technique that I've used to learn something new is to sign up at a meetup event or a user group or a conference talk to give a talk on something that you aren't necessarily an expert in, because then you're making a commitment to be able to develop expertise in that topic. And the very act of planning that, you have to anticipate the questions that people are going to ask you and come up to be prepared with those answers in advance. So it forces you to learn new things about the software that you might have otherwise skipped.
Could you say that your passion for teaching is related to a passion for learning?
Absolutely. I enjoy learning new things. I love teaching to others, and the act of doing that helps me become a more effective developer.
What kind of content have you taught recently?
Well, just today, just a little while ago, I taught I gave a presentation teaching people about Temporal, the open source software that makes applications more reliable. I've taught that internally within our company to new people, and I've taught that topic at other events, teaching workshops and giving presentations at other conferences.
When you teach that topic, have most people heard of Temporal before?
I would say that most people are new to it. Temporal has been around for a few years, but it's been a well-kept secret. It's becoming much more popular lately. A lot more people are learning about it and adopting it. But most of the people that I'm teaching, they're new to that technology. And it's really inspiring to see how it opens their eyes to a new way of doing things.
Do you find it difficult to teach concepts to people who have never heard of it before?
That's one of the challenges with Temporal. It's very difficult for people to explain exactly what it is. So it took me some time initially to figure out ways of explaining it, to relate it to what people already know. And I think that's a helpful way, is to learn about the person you're talking to, find out what their background is, and then come up with analogies that build on the knowledge they already have.
It's really complicated because you have to change your approach for every person you meet.
That's true, but it's also important because it makes it relevant to them. So whether it's Temporal or some other software, different people have different reasons for using it. They have different motivations. So getting to know the person that you're talking to helps you to frame the explanation in a way that's meaningful to them.
So have you always been really passionate for teaching your entire career?
Definitely. Yeah. From the very beginning, early in my career, I spent a lot of time learning new things, going to meetups and learning from other people. And I got to a certain point where I felt I had enough expertise that I could share that knowledge with others. And I wanted to give back by giving presentations about the topics that I knew or the topics that I wanted to learn, and then force myself to learn them. So from the very earliest parts of my career, I've been trying to teach other people, whether that was a formal part of my job as it is now in a technical education role, or whether I was a software engineer, and I was just teaching something to people at a meetup group at night after I've been working all day.
Did you just like magically decide to become a teacher, or did you talk to someone or have a friend who kind of encouraged you?
That's a good question. It was not an intentional decision. I took a job when I moved to the city that I live in, St. Louis. I took a job as a technical instructor there, and it was a job that was available, and I thought that I had the skills and it would force me to learn new things. So I did that because I felt like it was a good opportunity for where I wanted to go. And so I took that job. I enjoyed it very much. I learned a lot. It made me more productive as a developer, made me more productive with a different software that I used. And then I moved into software engineering roles after that, but I still benefited every day from the things that I'd learned by teaching others.
Do you feel like all your teaching is by presentations, or are there other formats like workshops or...
Sometimes it's presentations. That's effective when you're teaching somebody who's very new and they just want a quick overview of what the software is, the problems that it solves. But to actually get them to a point where they can begin using it for themselves, I think workshops are the best option, because a hands-on workshop where they get to write the code to practice what they've learned, then they get to explore what they've taught and see how they can apply it to their own work. That's the most effective way of teaching, I think, software development.
But I think workshops take more time commitment. Do you usually get a lot of signups and people who want to attend workshops?
Absolutely. For example, at the Replay conference last year in Seattle, I taught a little over 100 people in one of the workshops. It's a very large workshop session. Usually workshops tend to be small groups of people, maybe 10, maybe 20. And if you're teaching a very large workshop, it can be a challenge, because if somebody has a problem, you can help them. But if two people have a problem, you can't be in two places at once helping two different people. So I had a few other people helping me to manage that size of the crowd. But fortunately, everybody, they learned what they needed to. They didn't encounter any problems. Everybody was successful in completing it, and everybody gained a lot from it. So I think it was a successful experience.
When people work on the workshop, do they work together, form groups, or solo?
It's usually solo, because they're writing code, so each person is trying to solve the same problem for themselves. So, for example, they might need to implement a function to call a microservice, and everyone gets a chance to do that for themselves, and then they're free to experiment. So once they get that done, if they have time, they might want to change that code a little bit and see what would happen if they did something else. So everybody likes to have that individual freedom to try new things.
And do you have to be a super competent developer to try a workshop yourself?
No, I think the key to a workshop is for the person who creates the workshop to come up with hands-on exercises that reinforce what the people have learned, but you want to make sure that the instructions are very clear so that what you're asking them to do, they understand. So you need to write the instructions to be very concise and very clear, and give people small chunks of things to do. Don't give somebody do 10 things at once. Have them do one small step at a time, and they complete each one, and when they're successful, they move on to the next one, and then they see the end result of all of it, and it feels really good to have accomplished something like that.
Do you feel like there's a minimum bar of technical knowledge to be successful at a workshop?
Well, we try to create the workshops in a way that are accessible to the people we're trying to teach. So if it's an intro-level workshop for people that have never written with this software, then we try to make the examples very simple, very basic. We try to make it available in a lot of different languages so that people can choose whichever language they're most comfortable with. For example, some people may prefer Java, but others might feel that's a more difficult language. They prefer to do it in Python. And Python, for example, it's a language that I think a lot of people find very accessible, even if they've never written much code. You can look at the code and kind of figure out what it does very easily, and it's a very productive language for somebody just beginning.
But I think even to code in Python, you still have to minimally know how to code.
Yeah, that's true. But what we'll do in workshops is, instead of having people write, 20 lines of code, and a lot of the code is not very important to the learning, for example, import statements, it's just boilerplate code. We don't have people write that. We'll give the structure of the code, and we'll just omit a couple lines, and we'll have a comment that says, add a couple of statements here that will, print out a number. Maybe you increment a number and then print out the number. So we'll say right there in the code what we want you to do, and all the structure is already provided for you. You just need to fill in the blank. That makes it more accessible to people, and it takes less time for them to be able to do it.
Do you tell the workshop attendees what to write line for line, or?
We usually give them the goal that they want to accomplish and then leave it up to them as how could they do it. So for example, if you need to add up a bunch of different numbers, do we need to redo it for that sound?
It's okay, we can keep going.
Okay. For example, if you need to add up a series of numbers, there's lots of different ways that you could achieve that goal. And often it doesn't really matter how you achieve it. It's up to the student which way they want to do it. But the important thing is that they achieve the end goal, creating a sum of these numbers.
Are there multiple solutions to the end goal?
Yeah, for many cases, there are multiple solutions, multiple ways of achieving that goal, and they'll vary by, for example, some of them will take more lines of code than others. Some of them will have better performance than others. Some of them will be more secure than others. There's a lot of different things that you can optimize for, and a lot of different ways of solving the same problem.
Have you ever tried teaching workshops online?
Definitely, yeah. Teaching workshops online was something that definitely took off during COVID when people couldn't get together in person. I got a lot better at teaching workshops online. Before that, I found it very difficult to connect with people over a screen because I'm used to being right there in the room with people, and I can look at their faces and I can grasp whether they understand what I'm telling them or whether they're having trouble trying to complete something. It's a little more challenging to do that in a virtual situation, but it's definitely a skill that I improved on through Zoom. And the benefit of that is now that events are taking place in person again, it opens things up to a new audience. So it makes it possible for you to teach somebody on the other side of the world when you can't necessarily get together at the same time in the same place.
So when someone gets stuck on a problem in a workshop, could you say there's different body language on how they feel about it?
Yeah, different body language on how they feel about it. You can definitely pick up on cues from people, but they're cultural. So it depends, the people that you're working with, where they're from and how they express maybe frustration or they express surprise at how something worked out in their code. Another challenge, though, that we have is sometimes the online sessions, they're not synchronous. Sometimes you have an online session where you build software, you build a training course that people can complete at their own pace. Something that's pre-recorded, for example, and they can go through it at whatever time they want, whenever it's convenient for them, and you're not necessarily there to be able to answer their questions in real time. And so in that case, you have to provide a way for those people to give you feedback, and you've got to be able to respond to the feedback that you've gotten. Try to answer those questions as quickly as you can so that the other person's not waiting too long.
So, for someone getting their first job, kind of in that range, would you recommend they try a workshop?
A workshop is definitely a great way to do it. Another way for somebody who feels more technically proficient, they maybe have a basic understanding of the software they're using. A tutorial can be a great way to get started. That might be a bit less of a commitment in terms of time because a workshop might take an hour or 2 hours, where a tutorial might be a shorter, more focused thing that is really trying to teach one particular aspect of development. So a tutorial might be a smaller chunk to get started with.
What is a tutorial?
A tutorial is usually a series of instructions that has some end goal. So for example, a tutorial might tell you how to use a certain API or how to use a command line tool to accomplish a goal. And then it'll explain the problem and then walk you through the steps that you need to accomplish to solve that problem. Whereas a workshop will try to solve a series of problems, trying to help you understand the bigger picture about a development project.
So tutorials are like shorter versions of workshops?
Yeah, exactly. So to make an analogy, you could say that a workshop is teaching somebody how to cook an entire meal, and a tutorial might be how to chop an onion.
I think that's really good. Do you have anything else you want to bring up?
All I would say is that, again, what's been instrumental in my career is to learn things and then pass that knowledge on to other people by signing up to give talks at meetups, helping out on, if you're involved in an open source project, help out with the documentation on that project, or help answer questions on the mailing list or in the Slack communities. There's a lot of ways to give back with writing code is obviously one effective way to give back to an open source community, but it's not the only way. Helping out with documentation, helping new users get familiar with the software, teaching workshops, things like that, they're all effective ways of doing that. Not only does it help you, it helps improve your knowledge of that software as well.
So definitely as early developers, we should be reaching out to communities and trying to learn more.
Absolutely. That is the way that you move from being a junior developer or somebody that's new to a project to becoming a contributor and ultimately a committer to the project. That's how you get involved. That's been true for me for several open source communities, and I think it's been true for a lot of other people I know as well.
I think we covered a lot of good points today.
Okay.
You have a long history of education.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Cassandra.
Thank you.